We'll have a presentation from Dr. Matthew Mock.
So when I talked to my mother, I said, well, what I do is I do therapy. And what I do is I listen to children. I listen to families. I listen to little ones. And, some of you are therapists there. Little ones don't have the language to be able to talk about what has hurt them, what bothers them, what makes them upset or makes them anxious, or the traumas they've experienced. And so we sit down. I tell my mom, I said, we sit down, and sometimes we sit down and we have the people, we have them tell stories, and we have them do drawings, and we have them play in the sand, sand tray therapy. To this, my mother says, this is great, this is wonderful what you do. But what do you do to make a living? What do you do to pay the bills? What do you do to actually pay the rent and the bill? I said, Mom, this is what I do for a living. And I work in the public sector with people who I'm dedicated working with who don't have anything at all. And if you worked in a hospital setting, you could earn anywhere from $100, $150 if you were lucky to have insurance. To this, my mother lets out a multicultural shriek that's understood by everybody. It doesn't matter what language they speak. She says to my dad, Joe, come to the phone. Your son's doing something wrong. I think he's gambling. I think he's doing something illegal. What is my point? Well, first of all, I'm trying to also bring it to a point where we can have discussion. And I really, again, what Pam said, I think it was just right, including, I think it was a very well-placed change where she had a lot of children's slides in there. Because I'm dedicated to really working with kids who are already who we should be speaking for, who hopefully the system will be changed and hopefully the system will be better in order to serve those kids. So Pam is right. Those handouts are very essential, and please hold on to them. Don't worry about these, I'll read them out. Just tell you what Pam said, cultural competence is my sort of worst slide. Health plans, this is 1998. Health plans must provide services in a culturally competent manner to all Medicare patients, including those with limited English proficiency or reading skills, diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds, and physical or mental disabilities. So cultural competency in mental health care is no longer just a good thing to have. It's not just an add-on. It's actually a must, okay? It's a quality assurance issue. It's a quality assurance, quality improvement issue for everybody, okay? Pam already put up one of the definitions of cultural competence. Cultural competence is a set of skills, attitudes, policies, and structures which come together in a system of aging professionals and enable that system of aging professionals to work in cross-cultural situations. So that could be in mental health, but also related systems of healthcare, of social services, of legal services, of foster care services, education, and so on and so forth. And I'll elaborate more on that, okay? I believe in diverse learners. And so I give you this picture. This is my picture, my visual for visual learners. Oh, don't worry about what it says. I borrowed it. Thank you, Pam. Pam is so sharp. I just so love her as a colleague. What do you see? What's that? A rock. What else do you see? A road. What about the road? What about the road, the shape of the road? Okay, this is my picture of cultural competence. Let me explain why. Cultural competence in our health and mental health care system is not an end destination. It's unlike other practices where people say, okay, I'm competent to practice law. I'm competent to practice as a psychologist. Cultural competence is one in which you consistently have to seek it, and once you actually think you're there, you start questioning whether or not you're actually there. You get my meaning? Because you could never truly understand every single person, including a third-generation Chinese-American male that grew up in Santa Monica, California. That's me. Okay? Because we're different, right? There are similarities, commonalities, but we're different. Okay? And what is the barrier in the middle of the road? Here's my feeling about what cultural competency is at this time. I asked people, I said, how are our culturally competent systems, particularly as we're trying to repair them through Proposition 63, the Mental Health Services Act, of transforming mental health systems? And since this is a lunch crowd, this is my little humor. It's a serious study, but this is acknowledged. How is cultural competency in the mental health system? How do you feel cultural competency is in the mental health system? Or what have you heard? This is the call and response from the audience. What do you think? Terrible cultural competency? Behind the times. Limited. Horror. Someone else? We agree to disagree, everybody? Someone else? One more. Sensitive. Sensitive? Okay, one more. Underserved. Okay, checks in the mail for everybody. Okay? This is my question I asked. let's go around the table and give an update of each of our projects, kind of like cultural competency. The person says, my project is a pathetic series of poorly planned near-random acts. My life is a tragedy of emotional desperation. And the person who answered the question says, you know, it's more or less customary to say things are going fine. The person says, oops, I think you need a hug. I should have just said things are going fine. I've heard this in all the 30 years I've been in practice as a mental health practitioner, mental health as a professor, as a psychologist, as an advocate. In terms of people acknowledging what you all have, you have to acknowledge the boulder that's in the middle of the road, right? What are the obstacles? What are the things that are actually getting in the way for people to get access to sufficient care? Let's talk about those. Okay? My mother would be proud in that even though she doesn't know what I do for a living, she'll be happy I taught you a little Chinese, okay? I think that the mental health system, when it serves ethnic communities, is abominable and it's in crisis, okay? That in Chinese, crisis is composed of two words. The first means danger, and the second means change or motion, okay? So if you put them together, isn't that a beautiful character? Yeah, I think. You see that little precipice that's kind of weak there, it looks like it's about to fall, and then you have something that looks a little bit more that's sort of like together. If you put them both together, you actually get something like this. Okay, this is what the concept for what a culturally competent care system is, acknowledging the crisis, but know that it's an opportunity to change, embrace something that is much better and more serving of the communities that we are beholden to serve, okay? And I put up here acknowledging the caring and the resources, resiliency, identity, strength, integrity, skills. So what is it that's problematic in our systems? Well, there are a couple things I've listed out here as I was brainstorming, is that sometimes there are various things within individual care, as well as system care, as well as societal care, is that there's acts of omission in terms of acknowledging what we acknowledge in terms of diagnosis, in terms of what we acknowledge in terms of what is cultural practice, in terms of what we acknowledge in terms of what is a person's disability versus something that is more culturally informed and actually has a different frame if it was from a mother cultural perspective. And then I'm going to give some examples of these, okay? And I have to put down that it's my belief, the boulder in the middle of the road, is to acknowledge that there's institutional racism, heterosexism, genderism, classism, and these are all formidable barriers that are part of society that the mental health system is not separate from. But I'm a very optimist and very strong advocate, and I think that these are some things that we can address these barriers, particularly through the Mental Health Services Act. And the system is designed for a very few, okay, in some ways, and I think there are members of the audience that can speak to that. Okay? I think we have to get to a point where we acknowledge that in terms of mental health care, that has to take into account health care as well. Things like racism, we have statistics have come up. I know my colleagues here can acknowledge this. Heart disease, acknowledging heart disease and correlations to race. Particularly racism is not just diet, but it's also racism may raise black blood pressure in terms of acknowledging the societal stressors and how they impact somebody's mental health. Okay, and how do you address that? I ask all my audience, I teach a lot of graduate students, I always ask them, I said, in diagnosis, how do you diagnose, have you ever written down like racism or sexism or the others? So we listed homelessness, but we listed being a Vietnam vet or a war veteran, but we've never listed out racism. We never listed down poverty. I said, well, isn't that interesting? Because I would say that poverty and racism, they go hand in hand, and why are they not stressors? Why are they not considered to be societal stressors that we need to address? Let me just show you some things that are currently in my practice. I apologize, it's that passion thing. I hope I'm not going too fast. Okay, my knowledge. Okay, my apologies. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, is that cultural competency imperatives. Okay, and I don't really have to go through all of these, but just as a sampling. Okay, I often do these as a full day lecture. Is that cultural competency imperatives. By the year 2000, approximately, well, we're already beyond 2000, 1/3 of the U.S. population will be people of color. Well, demographic projections show that within the next decade, there will be no majority group in this nation. San Francisco, we know that all too well. I think that we are a microcosm. People always say that wherever California is, the rest of the nation will follow. Some will say, well, Berkeley and San Francisco that's where the rest of California will follow. Only recently, even in the diagnosis, have they acknowledged culture in diagnosis. Those of you who are practitioners, page 879 of the DSM-TR, Look at it. You should know it. It should be inscribed on in your mind. And actually, it is a diagnostic framework to actually be used to everybody. Because it's not just African American, Latino, Asian American, Native American, but it's also gay lesbian communities, bisexual transgender communities. It's also Jewish communities, Middle Eastern communities, South American communities. It's all the communities that make up the wonderful fabric of who we are as a culture. It's interesting that there are disproportionate percentages of diagnostic categories as well as specific groups, which Pam and I think Henry can talk about, but in terms of length of hospitalization, use of medication, and so on and so forth. There have been some articles that you probably came out, you have seen someone, actually a Chinese man actually, who was actually at Napa State Hospital for almost 20 years with a diagnosis, and then only come to find out that he was not the diagnosis that they thought, only because he did not speak much English. And therefore, he actually, while he was in chronic care, he actually did not have the severe diagnosis they had, but because they didn't have somebody to speak the language, he actually was hospitalized almost 20 years of his life. Now, is that just a good thing to have? No, it's obviously clearly an ethical issue, a legal issue, a humanity issue. Okay? And there's a disproportionate number of individuals that provide the care. Okay, and we're addressing that now in terms of who's going to be in the field. Ethics, okay? That ethics say that psychologists, since I'm a psychologist, this is where I frame from, is that we recognize the limits of competency, but are we able to make referrals? Okay, we're very fortunate here in the Bay Area, okay? But what about others that speak languages? Now again, we need to open up the frame, yeah? It's not just Chinese, but what about Hmong? What about Hmong community? As Dr. Tran was saying, is that there's no equivalent word for schizophrenia in certain cultures. Or there's no equivalent word for depression. But there's such a word as for bad wind. Or there's word for ba, the bad, getting rid of the bad energy. Or there's word for also the spirit loss, particularly in the Hmong community. And how do you restore spirit, particularly after the trauma, after the war? How am I doing time-wise? 5 minutes, okay. Wait, did you say it last time to Pam too?
Yeah.
So every time you ask, you say 5 minutes. So if I didn't ask, I could have had 10 minutes. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. It's good. This is a very serious topic, but I really hope I try to do my part in trying to turn this into a living room so we can really kind of interact, a little bit and understand. In research, okay, I'll just say this. This is an example. Is at one time, Stanley Su, who's a well-known psychologist, he was reviewing literature probably about 15 years ago, and he was reviewing a research article about some adolescents, African-American adolescents in Los Angeles. And they asked him for this very prominent journal, American Psychologist, that really helps us with our training, and says, do you think this should be published? And Dr. Su said, yes, it should be. I think this is really seminal work. It really will help us to understand African-American adolescents and what they go through. And the three others said, no, we didn't think it should be published. And here's how the story goes. When asked why they thought the others thought the research should not be published, they said, well, we don't think it should be published because while this is really significant for African-American adolescents, it's not counterbalanced and contrasted to a white control group of adolescents. Now think about that. The reason why to not publish this on African-American youth is because it's not a comparison to a European or white American group. What is the logic in that? So Stan went back and said, wait a second, why is it the research is done for certain individuals with this particular frame? How many studies have been published for European American individuals? And no one said, well, what about African American women in terms of contrast? Or Latinos, or gay lesbian, or you know what I mean? So the point being is that there's a particular frame, I think, that we are trying to break. And here's my little cartoon to show what we're trying to break. Okay? Is that we need to acknowledge, in order to create something new of which you are a part, we need to understand how the beast was created, and we need to unravel it. Yeah, we need to dismantle it in some ways. No, we can't dismantle it overnight, but we need to unravel it and try to get to a different place. Okay? And what are those things? I think Pam did a wonderful job of acknowledging the different things that need to be. I acknowledge this, that we need to acknowledge, again, on the other side of the omissions, you need to acknowledge the culture identity is a survival. To have proactive awareness that culture is very much a part of the treatment. It's not something separate, but it's a part of. That for many people, treatment is not just individual care, like in my mother's situation. It means family care. It means community involvement, however that's defined, yeah? It could be my faith community. It could be an elder who raised me, a lot of Native American elders. It's the whole community, right? So we need to change our response systems so that it is much more responsive and much more involving, okay? We need to also enable, and that's why I think I was really grateful that I followed Pam in terms of the advocacy point, that to acknowledge that solutions emanate from the community. We oftentimes come from a standpoint where we know and we say what is right, whereas I take a stand in all the years of my practice, it is others that know. And we're very fortunate to be able to bring them into the work with us to collaborate, in a relational kind of way so that we can work together, because you all are the experts in your own lives. And our consumers are those with disabilities. They are the wise people of their own lives. We're just fortunate to be there to help facilitate it. Okay? So I just acknowledging that we have different parts of ourself: a spiritual self, intrapsychic self, physical self, our immediate family, our extended family, friends and community, and larger society. And I think it's very important that we bring them all into the room. I think I had a lot more overheads, and I will save them in case for questions. But I will round it out in this way: is that we need to have specific guidelines. This is guidelines for psychotherapy. There's actually a guideline that now has been adopted for my practitioners on multicultural, working with multicultural clients and families in the mental health system. This is one that was adopted before that for lesbian, gay, bisexual clients. You see the NASW, the professional standards, is you have standards that also talk about standards for cultural competence and social work practice. Okay? So it's important to have laws, regulations, to regulate the field, to push practitioners, to push systems in order to be more culturally competent. And Proposition 63 does just that. Okay? So I will end with these two notes so I can give time to my other audience members. This is again the participation part. Is that what do you see here? What do you see here? What do you see here? Someone who looks scared? What else? Hiding? What else? What shape are they in? What shape? They're in a square. Someone said, who said that? They're in a square. They're in a box. Okay? Why we're here and why we need to address this, by the way, those of you, I always get critiqued a little bit, and people say, Matthew, you should really put your materials on PowerPoint. So in honor of you, I give you my one PowerPoint slide. So this is my one PowerPoint, okay? And it says, those of you who are cat lovers, it says, never ever think outside the box. Why do I say that for you? Because in our legal system, in our healthcare system, in our mental health system, in our social services structures, there's disproportionality of kids that are in foster care. African Americans in particular, Native American kids, disproportionality. The number of kids that are in special ed, Latino in particular, and African American, and some Asian. You look at the disproportionality. To me, that's the beginning, if you will, almost the seeds of the cycle for our kids on the lack of appropriate care, including mental health care. So you see that cycle. So the point about this is that no disrespect to cats, it's probably the few times that you think in the box, is that we need to deconstruct that box and really work hard as advocates to try this issue, to address this issue. Because after all, this is what a consumer who had disabilities that he was challenged by, he sent this to me, and I thought it was a poignant way to end and open up for conversation. It says, please hear what I'm not saying. Don't be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the face I wear, for I wear a mask. I wear 1,000 masks, masks that I'm afraid to take off, and none of them are me. But I don't tell you this. I don't dare. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid you'll think less of me and that you'll laugh, and your laugh would kill me. I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing, that I'm just no good, and that you'll see this and reject me. And so I play my game, my desperate pretending game, with a facade of assurance without and a trembling child within. And so begins the parade of masks, and my life becomes a front. I idly chatter to you in suave tones of surface talk. I tell you everything that's really nothing, and nothing of what's everything of what's crying within me. So I'm going through my routine. Do not be fooled by what I'm saying. Please listen carefully, and please try to hear what I'm not saying. And I think that's what we're all here for, in that finally, hearing the voices of those people who we've known who have been out there, but whose voices have not been heard. Thank you very much. I look forward to our question and answer period.
Are there any questions in the audience, or do you want to take a break, or?
Yeah, we're going to take a short, do you want to stretch a break or something? Thank you.